It's live. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight. DevOps Live. Just have a few announcements before we bring Brian on to present to us. You don't know JaC. So, yeah, you don't know JaC, exactly. So, a few announcements we have. We just got the dates for the DevOps Days DFW. We're going to have the Leadership Summit on August 29th, and then the DevOps Days conference itself is going to be August 30th and 31st. So, as soon as, check our website. It's alldaydevops.org, and you'll see it. We're going to have it published under Dallas-Fort Worth, and we're going to open it for call for papers, and registration will be on that website. Okay. And then if you don't have enough with the all-day DevOps in August, there's also going to be with the DevOps Days DFW, there's also going to be an all-day DevOps happening in October 17th, and it's going to be 24 hours. It's a free conference online, and there's going to be close to 100 presenters with several tracks. So I'm going to go ahead and have Brian Merkel. He's going to present to us managing Jenkins jobs and pipelines as code. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, as Mike mentioned, my name is Brian Miracle. I'm currently unaffiliated with any companies. I'm looking for work. But today I wanted to come by and share my experiences and talk a little bit about managing Jenkins jobs and pipelines through Jenkins as code. Now, if you're not unfamiliar, you might ask yourself, what does this actually mean? There we go. So when I say Jenkins as code, essentially what I'm saying is there are developers who are developing some groovy DSL functions and basically committing those to a source code repository, and Jenkins can read that configuration and create resources that Jenkins knows about. And there's basically, the jobs themselves are typically represented through XML, but this DSL will essentially convert code into this XML representation. And it does it through a few different mechanisms, but one thing you might be questioning is, why would I want to do this to begin with? I use Jenkins all the time. I just, the UI is pretty simple. I just make a job and it does what it wants. The issue is, in my opinion, is sort of you can lead to this configuration drift with your jobs. You can create, unless you have really strict controls around things, you can create the same job 1,000 times from 5 different people because they don't know what's out there, and it's easy for them to just create one. And so what I would like to see, and what I tried to do when I started my sort of going down this route, was how can we ensure that we know what jobs are out there, that they're being used, that if there was a need, people could find somewhere to find out what is available, and we could actually reuse a bunch of stuff. And so I went down this path with the JobDSL plugin and certain Jenkins sort of baseline functions that are available to you in code to figure this out. I've gone dark. So, okay. So there's a few things that I put together that really led me down this path. The first really one is about being able to version and see changes in source control. Have peer reviews that can actually provide value to your team. That you can collaborate on things. You can see what's happening. You can provide input, and you can see it in a very sort of natural way that engineers typically like to see stuff. You can create libraries that are reusable. So sort of to solve some of the reuse problem that you can do if you're just creating jobs naturally, you can create libraries that you can inject into these new jobs or pipelines that are creating that can be reused, and you sort of gain that benefit. What's nice about doing this stuff this way also is about being able to auto-create and manage the jobs themselves in Jenkins. You don't have to, once you have them all configured this way and referenced in DSL, now I can say, oh, I made a change to 6 jobs. I can just hit a button on Jenkins, and all of a sudden I get all those changes propagated out. And anything that was built off of some of the base configurations, they all get updated automatically. And you can configure those rules based off of, if say you created a new job, you want them to create it. If you already have an existing job, you want to update it. If you no longer reference that job, now it'll automatically be deleted. So now you can really, without having to visually go through all your Jenkins jobs, now I can know in code, if I no longer need this job, and I run it the next time, it'll just go away. But you also could leave it there if, it's very configurable that way. You can definitely take functionality that are provided by plugins, you can enhance them in this way. If you don't want to necessarily build a new plugin, you can basically take an existing plugin and orchestrate it with other code that you can help build, solve your problems. And you can also, because of the way the plugins works, you can specify really explicit security and permissions around who can do what with jobs. So as an example, there are some deployment jobs that only wanted to be applicable or available to be executed by people in a heightened role. And so within the DSL, we can sort of add what those permissions would be, and only people with those permissions are allowed to execute the jobs. And you can make it so that I can, as a non-production person, I can still look at it, I can look at the results, but I can't execute it. And this is available to do some of the multiple sort of authentication and authorization plugins that are available. There are some challenges, especially if you're starting out and maybe you don't know Groovy. If you are a Java developer, I would say Groovy is almost like that. It's very similar to that. It's a very sort of simple language, in my opinion, to learn. So there's that first step of learning how to program in Groovy and what's available. There's a couple of syntax things that you get kind of thrown off. There's no semicolons in Groovy, so you'll do that a bunch of times until you remember that doesn't work. And there's just a couple of syntax things that are sort of different. Because you're writing code and not just clicking a bunch of checkboxes and drop downs and UI, they do take a little longer to write. I would say once you write your first couple of them, it's really simple to sort of cut, paste, remove stuff that you need to. But once you sort of get used to it, it's really not that much different than going in and configuring a bunch of stuff in the UI. One of the major challenges that I ran into was, now that there's actual more source code now, so there's more assets and inventory you have to manage as a team. Who owns it, right? So the thing is, it'll vary based on how you run your organization. So I've seen in some cases where you're sort of, if you consider yourself full DevOps, where your team owns the process of developing your code all the way to managing it in production, your team has to own this process. The last place I was at, basically what happened was we had developers that were just solely focused on business logic and producing the artifact that would be built, and then we wrote pipelines that would sort of shuffle it, through many different stages into production. And there was I would say team, but it was really just me managing the maintenance of the pipeline code itself that would happen. So I created these shared libraries that we could use, and made the Jenkins file, which is basically a pipeline definition of the stages and steps that should be executed. Keep that really simple and offload all of the actual functionality to libraries that I would maintain. So the developer just sees this file, like it's just like, they typically wouldn't necessarily mess with the Docker file either. It'd just be another file in their repo that they just ignore because they don't know what's going on there. So I would say, like, that's if you go this route, you really should understand who's going to own it going forward, who in trying not to have it be one person. That you know, my old company was sad when I was telling them I'm leaving, because then someone else has to learn this. So I'm like, okay, can I teach 2 people? Because you're going to be in trouble and this guy leaves. Like, so let's not do that again. So the things that make this possible are basically 2 high-level things. It's this Groovy-based DSL, domain-specific language, and then a myriad of Jenkins plugins that sort of go together. The DSL is really, it really is a way to represent the XML configuration in code. And so you're sort of codifying this XML configuration and making it so that it's in it's a more, I would say, more understandable format. I mean, some of those XML things, you have no idea what they're kind of representing, what they're doing. In this language, it's pretty clear, very descriptive names about how you would create these XML blocks. You don't have to worry about the XML part. It's just, there's an API for it that you just basically, I want to specify my log rotation settings. There's a method for it. You pass in 4 parameters, and you're done. Yeah, and there's some functions that are built into the plugin itself, or into the language. Like, you can still get the standard, like I would say, like string comparison stuff. The methods like trim and replace and all that stuff is still there as a language support. But there are built-in functions that are provided by the platform that you can also utilize, like writing a file to your workspace or reading a file from your workspace. These are sort of built-in helper functions that just exist by doing it this way. The Jenkins JobDSL plugin is really the main plugin that handles your ability to create Jenkins jobs as code. This was a plugin that used to be owned by Java Posse. I don't know if you ever heard of that group. It's like a decade ago. I think they donated it to somebody else, and it's been maintained ever since. There's even been some updates this year. So it's a pretty heavily referenced and used plugin. Essentially, it allows you to write these scripts and execute them to create these XML configurations that will result in a dynamic job being created in Jenkins. It allows you to pull 1 or multiple sources down to accomplish this, and you can basically create as many, like, how you organize the job creation can be however you want, but you can put in however many things you want in this job to execute. So if you want to do one Groovy script per job, you could do that, and you would execute all of those things that you sort of assign to it.
Can you put the dependency? When you have dependency, and
not
we can reference multiple scripts. I was just thinking, if there is a dependency.
Well, so there's not. I wouldn't say that they're typically not dependent on. They shouldn't be dependent on one another. But you can't.
Independent of each other.
Yeah, you would make them independent, and you could also you can even just say like /star, right? So it'll do everything. If you have 100 of them, you want to list 100 of them in the script or in the job. But ultimately, you can do a regex style or ant style pattern of what to include when you're doing the job.
So we have to make sure they are not dependent at all. They have to be independent.
I don't say that. Well, so think about it's very sequential, right? So if one of the scripts executes something that like, say, for example, you organize Jenkins in folders, right? A sort of a structured way. If that folder doesn't exist by the time you run the script, you run into problems. So the order does what will matter about that, which is sort of why I've tended to list out the jobs, or I make them completely self-contained. So if I know I'm going to have a pipelines folder, I'll put the pipeline folder DSL in the same script, so I know it'll be able to get created automatically. It basically goes from top to bottom in the script. So here's just a sample job definition. So in this example, we're creating a freestyle job. The location will be under this jobs path, which is maybe I don't show it here because I don't want to see it all on one screen, but maybe there's a folder. There's also just like job. There's a folder. So I can create the folder that says jobs, and then here I'll say, under jobs, put this hello world thing. And so this is basically a very simple example. It shows like here's the display name. Here's what the description should say. Log rotator. So basically, how many build executions do you want to see at a time? How do you want to rotate those around? Obviously, these numbers are sort of magic numbers, right? You don't necessarily know what they mean right in this context. There are ways to sort of name them. I wanted to show that you can sort of do a shorthand of this. So that then you want to say like, min days. You could do that there too with sort of a map kind of style, where it's like name colon value kind of thing. Parameters, just like you would think, I'm going to create a string parameter that this job will ask the user to input when they execute the job. And this is a really simple bash script that says hello and whatever the name that you passed in is. The API for this is very verbose and extensive. So at the end of this, the last slide on this deck has all the resources that I've always used. They're also on the GitHub account for this project that I'll demo. So then you get to the pipeline. So pipelines are basically, there's a set of, if you looked at your managed plugins section, if you installed the pipeline one, there's like, I don't know, a dozen pipeline plugins. They all work together. But also ultimately, pipeline is really a way to group set of functionality together by stages, so that you can, with the sort of direction of, I'm going to take my source code and get it to some known states, to some maybe even to the deployment to production or pre-production. It's really a way to help understand, like to help ensure certain things happen along the way. Like your devs may not run static analysis or integration testing on their own machine. This process should do that, right? This process is meant to prove the quality of that software going towards production, or to whatever in deployment environment you want to go to. There are typically two different ways that this is defined. The old way was sort of the scripted way, where there was sort of like these functions that you could provide that would do this thing, but there wasn't a higher level, a real way to show it at a high level what this process looked like. And then when it came out with declarative last year, it really gives a really solid structure around how you can define what your pipeline should do and for each stage and each steps within the pipeline. And then running this, I think before you could potentially say I could chain jobs together. I could say this job should execute after this job and that one after that one. This sort of brings it all together under one job and allows you to get things like you can pause the pipeline and then resume later. If your slaves go away, it'll automatically pause it. If they come back with the same name, it'll resume automatically. So there's things that are really nice that are built into the Jenkins platform for support for the pipeline. And here is a sample pipeline definition job of creating a pipeline. So pipeline is just like Freestyle, pipeline is a separate type of job. In this case, there is a pipeline job, and then there's a multi-branch pipeline job. So I tend to use these if I want my pipelines to automatically kick off on commits, because this type of job will basically take, if you point your source code to it, it'll expect all the branches that are available, and any new branch that has a Jenkins file on it, it will automatically kick off if a change has happened. So I like to not have to do anything manual. So this really enables you to do that pretty easily. Really, it's a pretty simple setup. You're telling it where to go find it, includes everything. And then if you want to limit the number of pipelines that are shown to you at any given time, you can set that there too. Here's an example of a Jenkins pipeline definition. So this would be the Jenkins file format, and you typically store this in a file called Jenkins file, and it knows how to interpret it when it has. Well, it doesn't have to be named that either. It'll know by what the contents are. So typically, pipeline definition is very structured. It's like, here's my pipeline, and then where should my work be executed with an agent? Agents is sort of analogous to a node. You can specify things like none or any. So none, it'll run on master. Any, it'll run on the first available that it can find based off of your node rules. If you specify a label, you can say, I want this to target this particular set of nodes based on this label. So you really can say, for the entire pipeline, use this agent or node. Or I can say agent none, and then for each stage, I can say what agent to use. So you really can parallelize things in a way, or utilize. Let's say you're going to pre-production. Maybe you have nodes that are only targeted towards or allowed to execute against your pre-prod environments or your production environments. You can now say, in my stage, you use this label, and that will make it so that only things will happen on those slaves. Yeah. So this is the think about if I want to create a pipeline. I'm looking at the Jenkins UI. When I go to create new, there is an option for multi-branch pipeline, right? So this is the DSL that will create that multi-branch pipeline in code. Right.
So another way to do that is use Jenkins file also, right? The way we do it is we have a multi-branch pipeline system, but we tell for each user story feature branch which pipeline to kick off to GitHub. So we have commits, we have GitHub tied to our Jenkins and to Webhook. And for every commit, the pipeline gets kicked off. However, all of that is in Jenkins file. What you're talking about here is creating a pipeline itself for a particular branch as a job, as code.
No, not for a branch. This particular type of job looks at all branches. If I was targeting just like the word on line 3, it says multi-branch pipeline job. That just said pipeline job. Then you would be right. This type of job does that auto discovery on its own, providing you've told it to look at everything. You can target that includes there on line 10. You can sort of narrow down what you want to look at, but by default, if you just do star, I mean, I'll look at every branch that's there, and as things change, as those branches, the job will say, I find the Jenkins file, I will do a separate build for that, which is why I like this job a lot better, because it manages all that out of the box. And the Jenkins file is the definition of what that pipeline will run as a result of being executed. So you can in the Jenkins file itself create your parameters, your other type of stuff, but then you have something has to wrap it. You have to target it at something. So I can have a plain pipeline job that says just look for this Jenkins file on the workspace, because I've defined a source code repository section up above, so it'll pull down the code I'm looking for. This one does it automatically. And so I don't have an example of this running, but it auto discovers, it will create separate pipeline jobs themselves based on where it finds in the branch, in any branches that exist. So I would have a master pipeline execution. I would have whatever my next feature A branch as a separate pipeline underneath the guides of this job. When I look at it, it'll show me both of those things at the same time. And they're independently executable based off of the changes that are made.
We actually recently found this one, and we found this multiple pipeline very useful. You can actually pull your repo, like for feature branch, for develop branch, for release branch. So let's say you've got 5 developers, right? And then you put a feature branch, and then you send a pull request. Previously, the lead cannot see the all the testing has really passed or cleared. With this one, it keeps calling the repo, and the lead can see, for this developer, everything has passed. This is green.
Yeah.
You can see everything for all branches. So by that, and then you can just quickly, approve. So everything is all passed. You just approve that.
Yeah. Prior to this, prior to me finding this, the pipeline job, everything would execute in the same job. I'd have to know what build. Like you'd have to put something in the description to help you know where did this come from. Where this one is like automatic. You get you get a whole separate pipeline for each one, and it's really nice. Yeah. Any other questions there? So here's something I wanted to show, because basically, this is how I've done things in the past, and this is my opinion and the way I've done it. There's the different ways are boundless. Like you can do a lot of different things. So you can sort of see under so stage, compile, steps. And under steps, you could list whatever you want to do, right? You could say, in this case, I'm a Java guy, so I typically deal with Maven builds. I would run a Maven command that says, compile or test compile, whatever it is. You could run that right here. But what I like about this is I encapsulate that in a function that I pull in through this pipeline lib library. And now, anytime I want to change that, I only have to change that library. I don't have to change my pipeline definition.
Are you going to show us the goods?
I'm going to get in there. Get in there.
Like, the
yeah.
suspense, that's just the high level, right? Where's the goods?
Yeah, I'll get there. Yeah. Only 20 minutes in. We're almost, I swear, we have like, we're on 12 slides, 12 to 16, and 3 of them are just fluff. Okay, so yeah, so there's also ways for each stage and the pipeline itself to have post commands where you can say the result of my build at the end of executing, I can do something different based on the value of the result of the build. So in this case, I have a success and failure, but it can be aborted, unstable. There's.
Does your Groovy tool generate stuff like this for you? Like, does it have? Like, if you want to do a pipeline, does it have something like this, or is this your own representation? So
I don't know of any tool. I mean, there may be tools that will generate this for you. This structure is defined by the documentation for Jenkins, what Jenkins file is, right? So like pipeline, agent, stages, stage, steps.
Yeah.
Those are all part of the language.
Non-human elegance of this, and I was just wondering where
from the people who developed the third pipeline. So like execute, compile, stage steps. That's mine, right? Any functions here are
you chose to capture your stuff in this library, this lib up top.
Mm-hmm.
And do all your stuff there and keep their stuff like the way it is.
Yeah, and it makes it easier to read, and ultimately, what I really like about this is if you did this way and you wanted to make a change in one of the steps, now you have a whole new Jenkins file that you have to worry about. Whereas now I just have to update my library. It is literally two characters of a version number you can change in Jenkins, and all of a sudden now you got get your changes. That makes it real simple. So, sorry, yeah.
Are you going to show how you call that library? Do you have an example of that?
That's how I call it. So, line 2 is basically yeah.
So those execute, compile, stages, steps are your functions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good.
Okay. Yeah. So I definitely will get there. So obviously, it's, right checking your code. I got this last week. Is there a way to create? So I usually create a seed job that's basically like I can create all of my jobs through one job in Jenkins, and that's a Jenkins job that will execute JobDSL build step. You can create your Jenkins so that that job's automatically created through other means. It's really simple to set up, so I don't tend to do it that way, but you can. So I basically say, I'll start with one job, which is a Freestyle job that has like 2 settings on it, and I'm done. And so I create this job, I say, where's my source code repository? I say, which scripts to execute, and then I'm done. And then there's a demo. Yeah. All right. So where is my demo? Oh boy. Why doesn't it remember my stuff? So I'll say I started this before trying to do everything through Docker. But then my pipeline runs in Docker, so then I had Docker in Docker, and it's not impossible to do, but it's not straightforward. So this I'm not even showing it. Oh my gosh. Why is this not? Apologies.
There we go. Tried it.
Oh, great. So now I can't see it.
Couldn't see the word.
Where's my mirror? Oh, pardon me. There we go. Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. Okay. So this demo is just built off I'm running the war version of Jenkins right now. There's a lot of places where you can run it through Docker. You probably, if you already have one set up, you can do it there. Really?
Yep.
Why?
Oh,
Yeah.
Is it lagging or is it showing? Not showing?
it's not sure.
Okay. Bear with me for a second. I'm going
It's on that
to.
screen.
How about now?
Now it's your mountains.
I think it's only capturing one desktop.
Why is it going to be so difficult? Oh, where was I at? I was at, where am I at here? Oh. It was right here where I was. Where's my?
Money.
Oh, now.
There you go.
Well done.
Woo! That deserves a little bit of a drink. Okay, but now I have to do this weird thing over here. Okay, so yeah. So this is just a war file I ran. I mean, there's not much you have to do, and all the instructions of what you would have to do by default are on the GitHub page that I'll share. So this is basically what I created was a job called seed. It can be whatever you want. You're like, why does it have a hash in front of it? I do that so that it stays at the top because the jobs tend to like go alphabetical, and if I want this always to show up here, and so I just display named that. That's not an valid actual job name; it's a display name. So let's look at what this looks like. So this is just a standard freestyle job. Under advanced is where I put this display name. So that's really all I did there. I point it to my GitHub repo. And then all I'm doing is on the build step, there's a build step called process jobs DSLs. And basically I'll say look on file system, and I have these two demo jobs right here. And that's really it. There's this Groovy sandbox. Due to security concerns, and because you can do a lot of things, it out of the box will blacklist functions that you can, like if you want to just call even toString on something, it'll say, no, you can't do that. You could somehow mess something up. So you'd have to come in here and approve that script to be run. If you're running it in a sandbox, it says, okay, I'm gonna give you this space, and most of that stuff will just be automatically accepted. If you try to do something funky, it may not let you. I always use this because it's just ends up being easier. So here's some actions that you can sort of take based off of what you want it to do. Like I always do delete because I want to keep things clean. But you could ignore changes. You could disable the job. Like say in this case, if I execute these scripts one time and then I come back later and say I take out line 2 and run this, if I removed it, you can choose what you want Jenkins to do about that. You can ignore it. You could disable that job, or you can delete it. And so I choose just to get rid of it. There's a reason why I did that. I don't want to be around anymore. But if you wanted to play it safe, you could disable or ignore. And same thing for reviews and config files. There's also an advanced thing, which is basically, if I'm creating a job, how does Jenkins know how to reference it? Either if you do it from the root, your paths always have to be with that in mind. If you don't do that, it'll be wherever you are within the structure. But for the most part, I just leave that the same. This is kind of neat where you can fail it if the plugin needs to be, if there's a plugin that needs to be installed, or there's something that's using deprecated features. I tend to just leave this alone, or I'll check them. It doesn't matter. I don't care. This is for a demo. I mean, those decisions can be yours to have. That's it, right? So it's the Git reference, and then the process jobs DSLs, and this is a specific plugin. So there's a job DSL plugin that you have to have in order for this to work. But all those instructions are on the GitHub account. Yeah. So right now, there's nothing up my sleeves. I'm gonna go ahead and build this. So it's already done. Of course, unless I have the auto refresh on, you're not going to see it. But if I hit refresh, now I see I have a jobs folder and a pipelines folder. You don't need folders. This is just how I choose to sort of structure my stuff. But so we'll go into jobs real quick. That creates a Hello World JobDSL example. Click on that. Sort of was the one in the demo.
You missed it.
You missed the meat. No, so as we recall on the slide deck, it basically just says whatever you pass in, I'm going to say hello that. So that's pretty much the way it is. The more interesting one is the pipeline. So in this case, I built this is just a standard pipeline job. This is not the multi-branch one. And so we can go ahead and build that. And then I'll show the source code in a second. I don't know if it's just me, but I like to look at the output. You know, in this one, it's just really doing nothing, just sleeping for 5 seconds for each stage, just to sort of show, you know, all these outputs are coming from my shared library functions that are being executed as a result of the Jenkins file. So now I go back here, I see, oh, look, I have a nice little visual. Yay. Declarative pipeline, declarative step, sort of a pre and a post actions. Is you get this out of the box if you let Jenkins do the sort of the checkout of your source code. You could do nothing and do it yourself, but I say why. Let's let the pipeline do it. If you think this view is ugly, you can go over to Blue Ocean, the new sort of user, and then be really confused about what the heck to do next. And then you can just click here, and you can sort of see a different. This is like their new user interface, Blue Ocean, and mainly for pipeline visualization. You still have to. You can't do anything but look at it. Like it looks pretty, I guess, prettier. Yeah. So this is kind of nice. It kind of gives you it breaks out the things that it's doing, so you can sort of look and see all the stuff that happened as a result. You know, just a nice little sleep and some print statements. That's always fun. Okay, so what does this look like in code?
So Brian, while you're going there, if you rerun that job, what's the effect on existing jobs? Does it just detect that they're already there and it says I'm good, or does it?
So out of the box, it's dumb. It will do it. So where am I? Let's go back this way. Right, I can hit run again.
No, I'm not talking about that. But if you run the C job again, what is the impact on the?
It's idempotent.
Okay.
So you can run as many times as you want. And ultimately, it's only if you change the scripts or add scripts, remove scripts, does it will affect it.
Does it delete or modify?
So that was
delete, recreate, or does it modify?
So it will in place modify.
Okay.
Your history will still be there.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. The only caveat to that is if you add a stage to your pipeline. All the visualizations will go away because you changed it.
But that does that anyways by default.
No, it'll add on. So if you look at so get out of Blue Ocean, see how that sort of stacks them, right? But if I were to add like a static analysis stage, and then run it again,
Yeah.
those two will go away and you only see the one because it doesn't know how to represent two different states.
Okay.
Yep. So I would say if you're going to do some dashboarding, I would use the blue ocean side. This isn't so much fun. One thing I'll mention is that in my experience, what I've done is there will be times where you want to potentially prompt the user to make a decision, right? So the ultimate goal, is, well, my ultimate goal has always been to get to continuous deployment, right? So I want my pipelines to remove all manual steps out of my process. We've tested it enough. We feel safe that it does doing the right things, and I can not have to worry about change control or some ops guy has to push the button to deploy. He has no idea what that's going to do, but he's got to read my change control says push the button. I don't know what happened. Yeah, so you don't have to know what happens. Let the automation do that for you. So I don't know where I was going with that, but ultimately, I would say so the input steps. So I like to what I've tried to do to mitigate to sort of lend data analysis to decision-making skills is to capture metrics along the way. Right. So what I've tended to do is I'll use some time series data store like InfluxDB. I will capture like the metrics to me that are important are like how long did the stage run, how long did it take to do the build, how long did the pipeline run in general, what was the result of that of those things aggregated across the lifetime. Right. So if I can say I have 100 builds under my experience, and 95% of the time it's done the right thing, then the lights come on.
Yeah.
So then you can use that data to help you make decisions to eliminate those manual gates in the process. At first, you want them in there because you want the people that are typically have to be responsible to feel safe that it's going to work, and I have a way to stop it. Because you want that security, but you also want to build confidence in the process is working. And so the best way to do that is with data and capture metrics. And so before I left my last company, I captured every action that was important. I captured the execution time and the results, as well as the stages and the pipeline itself, and then provide dashboards to the management. And the best part was after 1 week, we had only 5% successful out of over 120 pipelines. You're like, what's going on here? It proved a lot of things. Didn't really understand how the pipelines were working and kept canceling them when they didn't have to. Like there were just things that were sort of obvious that there's a problem here. We needed to investigate. Without that data, 2 years had gone by, and no one really knew. And so now that that's visualized, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions.
Did you tie that in, inserting into the InfluxDB and where you have that?
Yeah, so I would create, in Groovy, you can create closures that's, let me show, well, so it's basically, you don't have to do it that way. So all I did was, Influx has a REST interface. So I would just basically do a start time and then end time, and then capture that metric and push it to Influx. And then we would use Grafana to visualize, create dashboards on that data. Yeah. But the way I did it, well, I didn't figure it out till like the second to last day I was there, because I was trying to do this as a closure, so I could say I'm gonna wrap this bit of code in this function, and let it do this automatically the start and stop time, so I didn't have to litter the code with it. But Groovy closures was were not as simple as I initially thought. And so I had to move on and forgot about it. But on the second to last day, I'm like, I'm gonna figure this thing out. And I know. And I did it. I was like, yes. And I actually have some. I put it on some gists up here too. I don't know. Do I show it? If I'm not. Those not public. I didn't see it till after.
So Brian,
yeah.
You have to look at your repository and GitHub to see how all this we can do it also.
I mean, I think that's probably the easiest way. So let's go ahead and come in here. So obviously, I made this for Glucon last week. After I did it, I'm like, why did I just name them generically and not use them wherever? I didn't do that. I could just go rename it or whatever. But ultimately, so this source code contains the in this particular case, it contains the job definitions, the functions that get called in the Jenkins file, and the Jenkins files themselves. Typically, you see the Jenkins files with the project. Did I do it that way? Hold on. So this is both. So you'll notice that when I created that C job, when I executed it, created a jobs folder and a pipelines folder. So I like to mirror that structure in source code too. So you'll see source, and I'll have jobs, and then here's my Ruby script that creates that hello world job, right? So here's the full code. So I have a variable that basically contains jobs. I create a folder with a display name and description, and then I create a job underneath that folder. This is pretty identical to the deck, but yeah. So this is all it took to create that one little job. And granted, it doesn't do anything fun, but yeah. So you can use folder. Basically, you can write Ruby code in here, and there's some primitives like folder, job that is available to you to use.
So just a Ruby question, maybe that small snippet of code there with talk about folder, space folder, and then the display name and description. Really, that's Ruby code saying that with this folder name is job. This is what the display name is, what you want to be, and the description. You're just setting the properties there.
Yep. So this would be so if you look at let's see, go to jobs. See how this folder name, jobs description, right? So basically, if you were to look at the configuration, like this it's weird how they do this. A folder is a job in a way. It's a weird thing. It's weird. So it is a folder job, essentially. But ultimately, this source code right here, built this job. So the name, display name, description. There's other things we could put in here that I just didn't do. But yeah, so this is really the minimum configuration I like to do just to keep things consistent and well described. Okay, and then so let's go to the pipelines. So here's the pipeline demo script. Very similar setup where I have a base folder, pipelines, create the folder. And then in this case, I'm creating a pipeline job with a display name description. And then, this is the tricky part of knowing what to do. Like, this isn't very clear. What does that mean? I don't know what the description, like the definition, CPS, SCM, like, you can't know this unless you look at the API. So there's, let's see, so there's this API here that's available to you to understand what's possible to do in this case. So let's go to pipeline that we just saw. So there's a pipeline job, right? Click on that, gives you some context help, and then allows you to say, okay, what are possible things I can do as a configuration of this job? And these all align to some field in the UI that you would create a pipeline with. Right. So this is where it says why not to do this. The start of this is somewhat challenging unless you have like some guidance. Like if I just based on what I gave you, you could easily adapt it to what you need. But there are reference APIs. There's APIs documented what you can do, and usually they show an example of what it looks like. So if I look at what does authorization look like? Okay, well I guess I'll add a permission, and then it shows you, what that would look like. And this is even worse. The permissions are all based off these like class path names. They did a weird thing here. They should have made this a little cleaner. Because to know what's available is like impossible. You have to go to the Jenkins API to even figure out what's available. So there are some. It's not all roses, but I think the benefits outweigh the cons.
How long have you been using this job?
2.5 years.
Have you had any issues when Jenkins upgrades with the JobDSL being incompatible?
So the only issue I had was when I was using CloudBees version Enterprise Jenkins, and it was mainly because we had written our own plugin, and since I didn't find their support very good, so we ended up moving away from it and going to full open source Jenkins. After that, we've had no problems. Like it hasn't been a problem. But not to say there won't ever be a problem. And this is why, the way we had set it up was we had a test Jenkins and then a prod Jenkins. We would do all of our updates and update plugins in the test one, make sure it looks good first before we went over here. We did everything as we were launching in Amazon, did everything as AMIs, so we could easily say, this AMI has been tested, I can promote it, and then with the process of.
So your setup was you have a GitHub or some Git location where you're storing all of your source code for each job that you're going to create.
Yeah, usually
you basically are calling it from that seed job. You're saying, I want to run these scripts.
Yeah. So if you see, let's see. So down here, source jobs, hello world, right? It equates to source pipeline.
I got that. So if you were going to add a new job, you would just create your Ruby script here that has your job definition, basically, and then you would just go add that line into your scripts that get run.
Yeah, I tended to do that. There's a way, so you can click on here, look at so you can do like wildcards.
Yeah.
So it's just so that you won't have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do that. I tend to not do that only because I don't have a really good reason other than I like to see everything. I don't want to be surprised.
Yeah, I was just thinking through like the process of like a team comes along and they go, hey, we have a new build. We need a new build. You're basically just going to go and create the Groovy script, upload it into your Git repository, and then just add that line. Yeah,
so you can do this in such a way where it's like you have trusted sort of paths. So it would you wouldn't have to mess with this job at all. Yeah. You'd have to rerun it. And you could schedule this, right? I could say based on changes to the repo, I could automatically be kicked off.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What does it do if there's a job failure?
Yeah, it'll give you this long stack trace and then you'll figure out I can't read this thing. What does this thing say? So sometimes it'll point back to. In some cases, it'll point back to. Say if you're using a shared library, it'll point back to the line number that you can go look at. Rarely is it that helpful.
Does it stop the whole script?
Yeah, but it will only fail, and so there are ways that you can validate ahead of time. There is a if it's on Jenkins or not. There's a script. There's a plugin that will validate your Jenkins file and everything below it to see if it's good. I think there's a function for it so that you can validate ahead of time. But if you don't do that, then say the failure doesn't get hit to like your pre-production stage, you'll die. And so you've waited for all that time, and so it gets kind of you have to. This is where unit testing could come in handy. I've always wanted to add tests, I never have. Bad brain. Let me show you. So this is the jobs. So for the functions themselves in the Jenkins file, so you'll see. Wait a minute. Did I not do that? Where is it? It should have been there. Why is it not there? Hold on. I'll show you this example. So if you look at the documentation for how to do shared libraries, they're going to give you two different approaches. One is you can put everything in a vars directory, and each of the Groovy files names will be the function name that you call. Right? So let's just pick this one for example. So this is, you'll see this in the compile stage under steps. You'll see a call out to this, and then parentheses, right? That equates to this definition, right? So if I don't want to pass in variable parameters, I can do that too. But this is sort of like the way that it knows how to execute. And then you can start doing stuff, right? So this is echoing out, some debugging stuff. It's doing this with credentials is a function that's available because of a plugin that I have. This basically allows you to pull in secrets. If you say you store them in Jenkins themselves as credentials, you can pull them in, and when you write stuff out, it'll automatically hide the values so you don't output them accidentally. So it's just, so in this case, I'm creating a dynamic settings file because the credentials could change per build, and then I just basically write it out and then pass it in as a parameter to my Maven script. Yeah. So you could do it the vars way, which the way this might look like a lot of stuff, but what I typically have done is I've had one script that does the steps part, and then I have a script per result handler. Like so the end of a stage. If I want to do something special, if it failed, then I have a way to encapsulate that. If it's success, they're not. I do it that way, but you can easily combine them. You could do them in one call and pass in the result. So this is just a really simple example of all I'm doing here is just outputting that it failed. But you can do anything in here you want to do cleanup step. You could do anything that you would want to do on a failure. You could notify, alert somebody this has happened. So this is at a stage level, but you don't have to do any of this stuff. This is just if I wanted to sort of highlight what you could do. So this is for a stage, and then I have a post pipeline, right? So this is at the end of the day. This is what happens when the pipeline fails, and I output it, and then basically have a function called notifications that will do something on failure. So it's pretty. So everything. So basically, this is a standard. Like it has to be under vars if you want to do this. There's an additional thing that you can start. You can be more object oriented. You can put stuff in the source directory that would be essentially creating Groovy classes, where this is sort of straight like a functional style, which I kind of like better. But yeah, that's not your cup of tea. You can create some objects, and there's documentation for all that stuff too out there. Yeah, that's a little bit of the secret sauce.
Very cool. So basically, at every stage, let's say you're sending a staff notification.
So it gets to chat. It gets a little chatty if you do that, right? So it really depends on what your team, how informed you want your team to be, right? So in the ones I've done in the past, it was configurable based off of some configuration, and they would say I want this level of notification turned on. You could flip a flag that says I want it all because I don't know what's happening. I want to be aware of it. But you could just do it on the pipeline failure or whatever, right? If you get to a pipeline and you have an input step that's basically requiring somebody to make a decision, I could say, hey, this decision is waiting on you. Here's the link back to the Jenkins to make that call. So you can notify as much as you want. I tended to do it on inputs and failures.
So these methods can take parameters out of the image.
Oh yeah.
Basically, that slash notification I was asking about, you can abstract that away and create a shared library. Mm-hmm. Have them as a part of shared library. Yeah. So I'll show you something that doesn't. The one thing you could do is, and so say you didn't want to put it all in one library, right? You want to separate out your concerns. Maybe you have a notifications library or whatever that could be reused across different other libraries. Nope. What am I doing? I want to go back to this source, Jenkins files. Oh, of course. That's why I didn't have a vars directory here, because I don't have any. I'm just sleeping. Let me hold on a second. I want to show you a Jenkins file. That's that one. No. Where is it?
So where this library is coming into effect, you can sort of notice this is an array. So if you wanted to separate out your libraries, you could create separate libraries and then basically call them here and separate them by commas. What's also nice here is so let me show you how you can reference this is because you have to create in Jenkins, there's a thing called global libraries. You can create them at a project level, or you can create them at a Jenkins level, right? So in my case, I tend to do them at the Jenkins level so everybody can take advantage of the same library. But under configure system, there's a section called, if you have the pipeline plugins, a section called global pipeline libraries. Where are you? Yeah. So I don't have a library call, so I don't have it here. But basically, you add it by giving it a name. So whatever that name is what you would reference in your Jenkins file. You know, I tend to name it the same as my repo name, right? And then you can tell what the default version is. So the version is just like, okay, you can point it to master. You can point it to any branch you want. So the way I'd done testing in the past was I'd get a branch off my library, make the changes, and then I would you can overwrite the default version in a Jenkins file to pull that version instead of what's listed here. So I could say by default I want master, or better is a tag, because master could always change, and you could inadvertently make changes to someone's running pipeline, and so you don't want to do that. So I would say if you are tagging your stuff, tags are better because it's a set moment in time. And then when you go to upgrade, I'm just upgrading one character, you know, whatever the number is. Yeah. And then here you can say what the default should be, and then you can specify the source code repository to pull the library from. So in this case, here I'm just pulling whatever the default version is. That's what I'll be pulling. If I want to say this is my app that I want to change, I want to test the changes of the pipeline that I just made. Now I can go in here and right here you can put an @ symbol and then the name of the branch. And so this allows you to override what global Jenkins is telling you to use. This will allow you to override and use what you want to use for testing. So I would create a branch of this, put that in there, and run my test, and it was good. I just kill the branch, and then basically I'm good. Yes.
Is Jenkins smart enough to know how long a stage or a step has been running? So that, say, for example, if it's a particular step has been running longer than a certain threshold, it can provide them.
So there is a timeout function that you can wrap your functions in. That you give it the unit of how much time you want it to spend.
But it's just a timeout. It wouldn't just keep going, but say it's been running for 3 hours. So you could do that too. You just wrap. So the timeout would basically would throw an exception if it reached the timeout. You could try catch the exception and make a decision on what to do next. So you can really do a lot of interesting things if you sort of start talking about, this basically works as a try catch model finally kind of blocks. So you can really take it. You could really do anything you want. By default, it's going to try and just throw an error up, and then you have ways of doing that too. There's an error function that you just basically pass a string to, and when you call it, when it gets called, it just spits up an error all the way to the top. But yeah, you can do error handling pretty nicely. Did you have a question? No. Okay.
No, I was saying you have an opinion on the new AND. The AND also is doing pretty cool stuff.
Who is?
And script.
Oh. Ant?
Yeah. With a similar concept of free and post.
Oh.
Integrate with Jenkins.
Okay.
Do you use that?
No. I've basically been I've been places that basically have been Maven since 2005.
No, it's easy.
Oh, has it? I don't know. I'm also starting to not like Maven because it does a lot of weird dependency things, and so I was liking it for a long time, and now I'm like, is there a better way? There's gotta be a better way now. too many dependencies they have to worry about. But, yeah. Yes.
So somewhere along the discussion, you mentioned something, an issue with enterprise version of Jenkins and the plugin.
Well, so this was my experience, and it was that we tried to do. It was right when Jenkins 2.x came out. We were trying to upgrade from 1. Whatever to 2.x, and we went through the steps. It didn't work, and then we finally figured out there was an issue with the plugin that we had, but there was nothing clear that was pointed it out. It took us 3 months to figure it out. They couldn't figure it out. We would get on calls with them and spend hours, and they would never figure it out. And so it was like, if we get to do the support ourselves, then why are we paying them the money? And we weren't seeing like, and we would see that at the time they had this operations center, which sort of manages as like, you know, master of masters kind of thing. We were finding that we would go down, our masters would go down too often, and we didn't really need a master of masters for what we were doing. And so because of the issue with upgrading and this lack of the support we weren't finding much value on, we decided to move everything to open source, and we had zero problems with it. It just has worked. And we're all, and that's not going to put it all on them. Like there were some definitely things that you know, it could have been that the way we were deploying that too. We were using our custom AMIs. We had a custom baker process that would bake AMIs, and so it wasn't quite the same process they would document you how to deploy things. It seemed to work from that perspective, but it was just some. That was also 2 years ago, so they may have gotten better since then. Any cloud-based people in here? No, much love, but we didn't need the extra stuff.
For a generic question, so if you have to implement this at the enterprise level, you know, that's the problem. You tell them to use the shared libraries and let them create their own pipelines to refer to these libraries, or you actually create one pipeline and just then.
So the question around how would you organize this for enterprise? How do you get this in a way so that people aren't bottlenecked and can do this stuff? So I can just tell you how we did it at my last company, how I sort of designed it, which was we kind of knew the developers were only focused on business logic, right? They would they had user stories, they complete the user stories. Once they commit the code to the repository, it's like hands off. They don't care. So my job was to create the pipelines in a way that would be easily maintainable. So what I did is I created a Jenkins job that would create Jenkins pipelines. Right. So basically, I templatized the pipeline creation, and then teams could go in and click the creator job. So create me a pipeline. Here's my source code project name and my repo name, and maybe a few other configurations. But then you click go, and it creates the pipeline job for you, right? And so the only requirement really is that you have the Jenkins file on in your source control project. At the time, we weren't using the root level, so we had like source pipelines Jenkins file. So everybody had to have a Jenkins file, and the documentation was like, pull it down from this. Here's the template. You know, I stored the Jenkins file, the master Jenkins file, in source control with my library, and says this is what you should always use. And inevitably, the structure of keeping it simple and streamlined was an iterative process. I didn't start out with this. I started out with doing stuff in here, and then every time I had to make a change, hey, 70 developers, change all of your Jenkins files, use this new thing. And as I encounter those problems, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. I'm going to completely encapsulate my functionality so I can do that work outside of it, and they never have to worry about it. Now, the only difference there is if I added a new stage. If I change the high level structure, then they would have to do that. So there a lot of care went into figuring out what stages we really wanted to have, And we could put configurations in there if it made sense to skip a stage here and there. But ultimately, the structure for about a year never changed. But I have a year's worth of changes that I made to the pipeline without having to touch this at all, which was really nice. So I manage it myself with one other person that would have basically part-time. But it was mentioned before that if devs went into the Jenkins file and messed with it, they just deleted it, or they just moved once. They get rid of all the stages except for one. The pipeline would just execute the definition, so it didn't matter. But at the end of the day, they had other metrics that they had to satisfy, that like other artifacts from the pipeline that if they didn't have, they couldn't deploy it. Like where's your Sonar Cube reports? Where's your code coverage? Where's your stack analysis? All that stuff. Where's your release in Nexus? Your artifact? Where's your image? Your AMI? Where's the metadata for that? Like all the things that you just get out of the box by using the pipeline. So no one ever messed with it because one, they didn't understand it, and two, they didn't have to care. So I would say like it really depends on the level of accountability you want at what level. If you don't have resources to spend on this, because I would say my full-time effort was on this for 2 years. It takes a lot. It takes time. It's not just you do it once and you're done. Like there's always things you can evolve with it, right? So metrics didn't happen on day one. I didn't start collecting metrics till probably a year and a half later, right? So I sort of stepped into, as I got the major things done. It requires some maintenance and understanding. And please, for your own safety, 2 or more people should know this.
Did you let the team control the code coverage and all the variables, or you had to?
So we use Sonar Cube, which the management team set up the quality profiles there, and so it was just on the pipeline to execute it, right? We had the pipeline executed Sonar Cube, sent the results, waited for the quality the gate to come back saying what the result was, and then we would fail the pipeline if it didn't meet criteria. Yeah.
You didn't dictate the parameters in those profiles inside Sonar Cube. The team did.
No, because we didn't trust them, right? What's the first thing to get cut when the timeline is getting close to the end of your sprint?
Right.
Yep. So we didn't want people to just accept the fact that they're never going to get to QA and not worry about it. We wanted these quality gates, and now it wasn't that we ever adjust the quality gates because certain people, or allow an override because maybe it was legacy code and you didn't have a lot of people. We didn't work on the code enough to sort of warrant more work. There was no ROI on it. It wasn't something that happened very often. But I would say like we want to make it so that they can get the stuff done, but we still want that quality checks in there, right? We don't want to inadvertently set something to production that doesn't pass the quality standards. And so I would say that it really has to, like, your organization is going to be some growing pains on this because, at the end of the day, they get incentivized by getting their projects done on time and budget. That don't quite line up with the quality aspect of it. Quality goes down the less time and budget you have, because you can't do all three. You can't have a high quality with low budget and low time. Like doesn't work.
You want to show the last 2 slides that you have?
Oh yes, I certainly do. Thank you. Well, maybe. So you see it on the.
I see the screen.
So it was questions.
Yeah.
Which we did a whole bunch of stuff. So it's me thanking everybody for coming and some of my contact information. I love this stuff, so please feel free to reach out if you have questions or want to talk about other stuff or just want a friend. I'm friendly. I like that. I like friends. And then all the links. But so I would say go to GitHub because they're all there, and it's a lot easier to click on a link than try and. Gosh, yeah, I will. One second.
Yeah, the slide decks are going to be up on the Meetup, and they're on.
They're on
Twitter.
They're on SlideShare.net too.
SlideShare.net.
Where was I looking? What was I going to show you? Oh yeah. So this thing, the README at the bottom. So the README shows you how basically how to, if you want to set this up locally to sort of test things out. It's very minimal set of steps, and then resources. These are all those links that are on the SlideShare slide deck. So.
Okay. So all the slides are up on SlideShare, and they were posted up on the Meetup, and they're also on posted on Twitter. So if you want to go back and review it, you can always go back and review it as well.
Real. Play.
Okay, that concludes tonight's session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. That was an hour and 15 minutes.